Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we're tackling a really heavy figure, Edward Gein, often called the Butcher of Plainfield.
Yeah, and his story isn't just, another true crime case. It's arguably the moment American horror took a sharp, dark turn.
It really is. And the sources we've gathered, well, they're intense. They paint a picture of why this man, with technically only two confirmed murders, looms so large.
It's fascinating, isn't it, how the cultural impact just outweighs the body count by such a huge margin. That's really what we need to understand.
Exactly. That's the core of our mission today. We want to unpack how Gein's crimes, disturbing as they were, became this historical pivot.
The foundation, really.
Right, the foundation, providing the whole structural package for American horror after 1960, and at the same time, we absolutely have to grapple with the ethics of it all.
Oh, definitely. The way this trauma keeps getting commercialized, fictionalized, it raises huge questions.
So where do we even start?
Well, I think the key concept is seeing Geen as a kind of necessary cultural precursor. That's the hook.
Okay, what does that mean exactly?
Before Plainfield, Wisconsin, 1957, horror movies were different,
Yeah.
Gothic, supernatural, vampires, werewolves, things in faraway castles or lagoons.
Distant threats, easier to dismiss.
Precisely. Geen, he dragged the monster out of the fantasy realm and dropped it right into the American heartland. He gave horror this template for something darker, more personal.
Rooted in real, plausible domestic evil, the kind that feels like it could actually happen.
Exactly, the kind that could be living just down the road.
Okay, let's really dig into that shift then, because it wasn't subtle, was it? It was a total reshaping of fear itself. So you mentioned the pre-Gein villains, external forces, supernatural, maybe alien, Dracula, Frankenstein's monster.
Right, things you could, intellectually wall off. But then the details from Plainfield emerge. The skin suits, the furniture.
And suddenly evil isn't out there anymore. It's internal.
Yeah.
It's psychological trauma festering behind a closed door. It's immediate.
And that immediacy, that's the rocket fuel for the slasher genre, isn't it? The monster wasn't some creature, it was just a guy. A deeply, deeply damaged ordinary man.
And that provided this psychological layer that just wasn't there before in the same way.
Absolutely. Gein's backstory, his actions, they offered this real-world, almost diagnosable explanation for extreme violence. It resonated because it tapped into anxieties that were already simmering under the surface of that whole post-war conformist American dream.
Hang on a second. Just playing devil's advocate here. His confirmed kill count is only two. Many serial killers who came later, like Bundy or Casey, killed far more people. Why does Gein get this foundational status? Why not someone with a higher tally?
That's the crucial question, right? And it's not about the quantity of victims, it's about the quality of the trauma and, more importantly, the vocabulary he provided.
Okay.
Yeah, the structural vocabulary. The Zodiac killer, for instance, he gave us terror and anonymity, a different kind of fear. But Gein, he handed Hollywood a ready-made blueprint, the villain's origin story, the specific aesthetic of the horror. It was all there.
A usable script.
Exactly. We can actually break down his specific pathology based on the sources and see the components he basically injected into the horror framework.
Okay, let's get into that pathology. The relationship with his mother, Augusta, seems absolutely central.
Oh, it's the cornerstone. You look at the analyses, and it's this profound mother fixation, a textbook Oedipus complex, but amplified to an almost unbelievable degree by isolation and her fanaticism.
She was incredibly religious, wasn't she? Dominating.
Zealously fundamentalist Protestant, terrified Ed and his brother Henry with constant talk of hellfire, sin, especially around women and sex. She kept them isolated, filled his head with this idea that all women except her were vessels of evil. It was complete emotional and psychological control. Abuse, really.
So it wasn't just general repression. It was this very specific, religiously charged sexual terror combined with total dependence on her.
Right. And when she died in 1945, his already fragile psyche just shattered. Forensic psychologists often interpret the grave robbing, the crafting, as this incredibly twisted attempt to deal with that loss.
To replace her, or even become her.
That's the theory. Trying to resurrect the lost maternal figure, which explains the focus on female bodies, the masks, the infamous woman suit. So you have these core factors: repressed sexuality, severe abuse, that intense maternal obsession. That's the psychological engine he gave to slashers.
Plausible, in a terrifying way. Evil rooted in a broken mind, not a curse.
Makes it scarier, doesn't it? Because it feels like it could happen.
And this psychological mess leads directly to what you called his comprehensive structural package, the blueprint for modern horror.
Yeah, we can really boil it down to 3 key elements that pop up again and again in the source material. First, the setting.
Right. Goodbye, Gothic castles.
Hello, isolated, ordinary, boring Plainfield, Wisconsin. The middle of nowhere. The horror is domestic, homegrown. Think Texas Chain Saw Massacre. Think Psycho. It's right here.
Okay, element 1. The mundane setting. What's 2?
The internal psychological rationale. The violence isn't just random monstrousness. It comes from somewhere specific. Deep familial trauma, like we just discussed.
So the killer has a backstory, a reason however twisted. Norman Bates and his mother.
Exactly. It gives the evil a kind of grotesque logic. And the third element, this is the big one, the game changer.
The aesthetic.
The entirely new aesthetic vocabulary. Corporeal horror.
Corporeal horror, meaning
horror focused on the body itself. Not ghosts or demons attacking the soul, but the physical, visceral violation and, crucially, manipulation of the human body, using skin, bone, organs as craft materials.
the lampshades, the chair coverings, the masks.
That imagery, utterly unique to Gein at the time and absolutely foundational, that's the package. Setting, psychology, and this unforgettable, gruesome aesthetic.
And that aesthetic, the sheer visual shock of those artifacts, that's what gave filmmakers the permission, the justification, to really lean into visceral, body-centric horror.
It fundamentally shifted the focus. Horror became about the fragility and violation of the physical self, not just bumps in the night.
Like you said, it's the difference between being scared of a ghost and being scared of what your neighbor might do with your skin.
A much more primal biological fear.
Okay, so Gein provides this essential DNA. The sources argue it's more than just inspiration for films like Psycho, Texas Chain Saw, Silence of the Lambs. It's like the operating system they run on.
It really is. Take them out, and the psychological core of those films just collapses. But we don't even need to look at just those big 3. We can trace a really direct line, almost like a documentary echo, much earlier.
You're talking about Deranged, the 1974 film.
Exactly. Deranged. It often gets overlooked, but it is basically Ed Gein's life story put on screen, warts and all. It's incredibly close to the actual facts.
How close are we talking?
Uncomfortably close. The film nails those structural elements we talked about. The isolated Midwestern farmer, the whole thing kicking off after the death of his deeply religious, controlling mother.
And the specific acts.
Oh, yeah. Grave robbing, taxidermy, the skinning bodies to make masks and clothing. It's all depicted with this raw, uncomfortable specificity. It shows just how quickly filmmakers understood the power, the marketability even of this grounded psychological breakdown.
You didn't need monsters from space anymore.
Nope. Just a disturbed mind, a remote farmhouse, and, well, some human remains. It proved the viability of the Gein template almost immediately.
And it wasn't just the big plot points, was it? Even the tools of horror changed.
That's a great point. The shift to domestic horror meant a shift in weapons. Forget fangs and spells. Now it's chainsaws, hammers, kitchen knives.
Tools from the shed or the kitchen drawer.
Because the killer is ordinary, maybe even your neighbor, the tools they use are ordinary too. Tools of everyday life, of rural work, twisted into instruments of terror. That contrast is key.
And this stuff, this Gein DNA, it didn't just vanish after the 70s.
Yeah.
It keeps popping up, right? Even in modern TV.
Constantly. That specific fascination with, using human skin, human bone, it still delivers that visceral shock. The sources point specifically to American Horror Story, Asylum.
The bloody face character.
Right. The whole mask made of skin, the way he uses victims' bodies, it pulls so heavily, so directly from Gein's methods. It shows that aesthetic vocabulary is still the go-to shorthand for extreme psychological dysfunction and that kind of intimate domestic horror.
It's like that image, the killer wearing the victim's face or using their parts. It's just too powerful, too symbolically loaded to ever really go away.
It signifies the ultimate breakdown, doesn't it? A complete shattering of identity, humanity, the boundary between self and other. That symbolic weight ensures Gein remains this foundational text for horror creators.
It is really striking how his name alone, Gein, became more than just a name. It's like a cultural shorthand now, right?
Right.
For the absolute extreme.
Yeah, it functions almost like an adjective for a certain kind of hidden, grotesque depravity. The quiet neighbor, the benign facade hiding the abyss. And this symbolic power cemented his place not just in movies, but definitely in true crime writing.
So who are the key authors who really ran with his psychological profile?
Well, the most immediate and famous is Robert Bloch. He lived fairly close to Plainfield, heard the stories, and directly fictionalized the case for his 1959 novel Psycho.
Norman Bates.
Norman Bates is Ed Gein, transposed, the quiet, isolated motel owner, utterly dominated by his dead mother. It's a direct lift of the psychological profile and the core dynamic.
And then later, Thomas Harris.
Decades later, yeah. With Silence of the Lambs, now Hannibal Lecter is obviously his own kind of monster, more intellectualized, but Buffalo Bill,
James Gunn.
he's making the woman suit. Exactly. That is pure, unadulterated gain. The skinning, the crafting, driven by this profound identity crisis. It's the direct reuse of Gain's most unique, most shocking aesthetic element, that corporeal horror, to define the killer. Block and Harris basically locked his pathology in as the gold standard for that kind of internalized, domestically rooted evil in thriller fiction.
So the act itself, the skinning and crafting, becomes the signature. It links these different characters and stories back to him.
It's the indelible mark. But that transgression, that specific imagery, it jumped beyond books and film, too. It got picked up by subcultures really invested in pushing boundaries. Extreme music, specifically.
Right, this is where the symbolism gets really intense.
Yeah, the sources give some really vivid examples, like the thrash metal band Slayer, their 1990 song Dead Skin Mask.
That title alone.
It's explicitly about Gein. The lyrics directly reference the things found in his house, the masks, the axe. It's not subtle.
And then there was Mudvayne, the new metal band. They had nothing to Gein in 2000. Again, using his name, his story, as a direct reference point for exploring psychosis.
These aren't just passing mentions. They're deliberate appropriations of his mythology for maximum shock value.
Which brings up the question, why him? Why do these specific acts, the grave robbing, the skinning, the mask making, become these symbolic touchstones for genres built on shock and transgression?
Well, think about what those acts represent. It's not just violence, it's violating the dead, a near universal taboo. It's the destruction of identity by turning a person into an object, into material.
Is messing with the human form itself in the most profound way.
Exactly. So for artists looking to provoke, to challenge norms, to traffic in the truly unspeakable, Gein offers this perfect real-life narrative. He embodies the grotesque collision of psychosis and quiet everyday life. It makes him irresistible as a symbol of ultimate extremity.
And that kind of irresistible dark magnetism leads us right into the ethical minefield, doesn't it? His story has this irresistible cultural gravity, as the sources put it. It just keeps coming back.
It does, and the research points to the planned 2025 Netflix series, Monster. The Ed Gein Story as a prime example of this modern resurgence, forcing us to confront these issues all over again.
What's the core ethical problem identified in the research?
It boils down to this. The sheer visual power, the gravity of Gein's artifacts, the masks, the suit, the furniture, almost inevitably overshadows the victims. Bernice Worden, Mary Hogan, the desecrated bodies. Their stories get lost in the spectacle of his creations.
Even when creators have good intentions.
Even then, it's a problem that started the moment the press descended on Plainfield in 1957. The coverage back then was pure sensationalism, all lurid headlines about the House of Horrors, the skin lampshades.
Focusing entirely on the shocking discoveries.
Right, and the victims became footnotes almost immediately. Their humanity was eclipsed by the visual horror. That spectacle became the story.
And the criticism now is that modern retellings, maybe even aspects of this upcoming Netflix show, risk falling into that same trap, becoming a pure freak show.
That's the argument, that they end up just grimly titillating the audience, echoing that original sensationalism instead of offering real context or, restoring dignity to the victims. But it's deeper than just bad taste. There's a structural problem here.
A structural problem within the horror genre itself.
Yes, a genre that Gein fundamentally helps shape. The core tropes, the killer's mask, the modified body parts, the trophies, these are built directly on Gein's specific artifacts.
So if you want to tell the Gein story accurately, especially focusing on what made him unique,
you have to show the artifacts. You have to depict the skinning, the crafting, because that is his unique signature, his iconography. But in doing so, you inevitably reinforce the very visual language that erased the victims in the first place.
Wow. So the spectacle is the narrative engine. Trying to be historically accurate means you risk repeating the original sin of the media coverage.
It's a terrible paradox. The victims get structurally relegated. They become plot devices leading to the discovery of the shocking things the killer made. The sources describe it as this cycle. Gein becomes culturally huge because of the artifacts, and the artifacts inherently diminish the victims.
Making a truly non-exploitative retelling incredibly difficult, maybe impossible, if you stick to the facts of his specific crimes.
Exactly. Because the very things that make the story so compelling and influential, that specific aesthetic of corporeal horror, are the same things that make it so ethically fraught. He created a narrative package so visually potent, its design almost resists ethical reinterpretation.
Okay, so if retelling the story ethically is so hard, structurally hard, why do we keep doing it? Why is this particular brand of horror still so marketable, generation after generation?
Well, the constant fictionalization, the commercial drive, especially that recurring image of the woman suit, it keeps his specific pathology alive and culturally potent. It's essentially marketable trauma.
And the argument is it's marketable because it plugs into something deeper in the culture, these underlying anxieties.
Yes, the research suggests the gene narrative functions as a kind of repository and externalization for deep-seated American anxieties that we might not want to confront directly, especially anxieties from that post-war era he emerged from.
Like, what kind of anxieties are we talking about?
Several layers. There's the basic terror of rural isolation, the idea that this kind of horror can just brew unseen behind a farmhouse door for years.
Far from help, far from anyone knowing.
Right. Then there's the instability of identity. Your quiet neighbor, the person you think you know, could be capable of this. It shatters any illusion of safe community.
And maybe the biggest one, the failure of the family.
Absolutely. Gene is like the ultimate nightmare indictment of the American family unit. The idea that this supposedly sacred institution could not just fail, but actively create a monster like him. That fundamentally challenges the idealized image of the 1950s family.
And underlying all of that.
The fear of the repressed self. The terrifying thought that maybe extreme deviance, this potential for utter boundary breakdown, isn't just out there, but could be latent inside any seemingly normal person. That's profoundly unsettling.
Okay, so it taps into these deep fears. But the sources also offer a framework for why we keep compulsively repeating the story. This idea of trauma transference. Let's unpack that carefully.
Right. Trauma transference theory suggests that repeating these narratives, especially in horror films or true crime shows, acts as a kind of societal coping mechanism. It lets us collectively process and negotiate deep taboos that are too frightening or disturbing to deal with directly.
A safe space to confront the unthinkable.
Sort of. It works through two main mechanisms, according to the analysis. Mechanism 1, the story provides a space for the pleasurable expression of taboo wishes.
Pleasurable. That sounds wrong.
It means engaging with forbidden concepts, necrophilia, cannibalism, dismemberment from a safe distance. The fictional frame allows the audience to explore these dark ideas without actual consequence. It's a kind of psychological release.
Okay, I see. Exploring the darkness without getting consumed by it. What's mechanism 2?
Mechanism 2 provides the moral safety net. The narrative structure always ensures the ultimate censorship of those taboo wishes.
Meaning the killer gets caught.
Exactly. The killer is captured, punished, institutionalized, killed. Order is restored. The transgression is contained, reaffirming that these acts are wrong, and society rejects them.
So it's this cycle.
Yeah.
We're drawn in by the taboo, allowed to explore it vicariously, and then reassured when the boundary is firmly put back in place. Attraction and repulsion.
Precisely. We get to confront the darkest parts of human potential, but the story structure guarantees we walk away with the moral order seemingly intact.
And the conclusion, then, is that this very process is what keeps Gein's story alive and kicking.
That's the argument. This cycle of trauma transference explains the enduring market demand. Our need to safely confront these extreme concepts, these deep anxieties about violence, identity, and the family, guarantees that the butcher of Plainfield and the ethical problems he represents remain disturbingly relevant and commercially viable.
The story isn't just history, then. It's an ongoing, profitable reflection of our collective psyche. #outro. Wow. Okay, we have covered a huge amount of territory today. I think the key takeaways are, first, establishing Ed Gein not just as a killer, but as the structural architect of modern domestic horror.
Yeah, providing that package,
Yeah.
the ordinary setting, the psychological rationale rooted in family trauma, and that completely unique, unforgettable aesthetic of corporeal horror. He laid the groundwork.
And second, really grappling with the ongoing, very tricky ethical negotiation that happens when horrific trauma becomes a reusable, marketable commodity.
Highlighting that built-in problem where the visual elements that make his story so potent are the very things that tend to erase his victims, trapping us in this cycle that started way back in 1957.
So we want to leave you with a final thought to consider, building on that idea of trauma transference we just discussed.
If Gein's story remains so powerful because it lets us externalize our deepest fears about family failure, unstable identity, the repressed self, what does the constant market demand for his story tell us about society now?
What fundamental taboos, what anxieties are we trying to safely process today that keep the butcher of Plainfield so perpetually relevant, so necessary?
Something to think about.
Indeed. We'll see you on the next Deep Dive.